WLRN edition 107 in 3, 2, 1.
I was born woman, off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Sisters rise again. I was born woman, off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Rise and rise again.
Greetings and welcome to the 107th edition podcast of Women's Liberation Radio News for this Thursday, March 6th, 2025. I'm Thistle, founding member of the collective and ardent realist. I kind of like how my voice sounds today. It's almost like I inhaled some wildfire smoke or something. But no, actually, I have a little bit of a cold. So forgive my scratchy throat, but it kind of goes along with today's podcast topic. As of late, WLRN has placed its focus on the realms of ecofeminist thought, theory, and practice due to the release of Man Against Being, Body Horror, and the Death of Life, a groundbreaking book by WLRN member and ecofeminist author Aurora Linnea. February's episode was dedicated to examining ecofeminism and Aurora's book. If you'd like to check out that show, archived at WLRNmedia.com. Continuing along in an ecofeminist vein, our topic this month is the LA fires and how they're connected to our broader discussion of women in the environment. I spoke with two feminist women living in the LA area about the fires and asked them to describe their experiences and also to give their take on women and women's roles around the fires and what putting ecofeminist thought and theory into practice may look like for them in their communities. My first guest was Ava Park, the founder and director of the Museum of Woman and the presiding priestess of the Goddess Temple of Orange County, a women's spiritual circle of the Museum of Woman. She spoke with me about her work in the LA area, the impact of the fires on her community, and the kinds of responses she has witnessed. Ava makes an ecofeminist call to action for us to write to the mayor of LA to request reinstatement of lesbian fire chief Kristen Crowley, who was fired despite her efforts to defend the job she did with the means that she had. Listen later on in the show for the details and why Ava feels writing to the mayor of LA is the most useful and ecofeminist action we can take from afar at this time to support women's efforts in healing from the LA fires. Our second guest is Goldie Hoffman, an actor and comedian from LA who was safely vacationing up in the mountains when the fires broke out, but upon returning to her home, she discovered a gray toxic ash covering all of the grass, the bushes, and trees in her neighborhood. Goldie's personal story and her evaluation of how Angelenos are faring since the fires were controlled is compelling, if not a call for women around the world to organize in ecofeminist armies. The team at WLRN produces a monthly radio broadcast to break the sound barrier women are blocked by under the status quo rule of men. This blocking of women's discourse we see in all sectors of society, be they conservative, liberal, mainstream, progressive, or radical. The thread that runs through all of American politics, except for separatist feminism, is male dominance and entitlement in all spheres. To start off today's edition, here's Mary O'Neill with women's news from around the globe for this Thursday, March 6th, 2025. Take it away, Mary.
Thanks, Thistle. Donald Trump fired Admiral Linda Fagan, the highest-ranking woman in the U.S. military. The official reason is that she placed too much emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion and failed to address recruitment problems and border security threats. He also fired Admiral Lisa Franchetti, Chief of Naval Operations. She was the first woman to hold the position. These terminations are among thousands that have taken place since Trump took office. They also come amidst the confirmation of Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. Hegseth has stated that he believes women should not serve in combat roles. He has also been accused of sexual assault and domestic violence. Spanish police dismantled a human trafficking ring which exploited more than 1,000 women in the last year. Most of the women were from Colombia and Venezuela. They were lured to Spain with fake job offers and then sexually trafficked in clubs. They were only allowed to go out for 2 hours a day. In the Congolese city of Goma, hundreds of male prisoners raped and killed more than 150 female inmates during a jailbreak. Male inmates set fire to the prison and most of the women burned alive. Only 9 to 13 women survived, but they had also been raped at the hands of the male inmates. This took place as the M23 Rebel Alliance fought with Congolese forces in Goma, and the use of sexual violence is not solitary. Jeremy Lawrence, a spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said, "We are verifying reports that 52 women were raped by Congolese troops in South Kivu, including alleged reports of gang rape." Barbie and Peter Reynolds, a British couple in their 70s who spent 20 years running education programs in Afghanistan, were arrested on February 1st. While their children were able to message them for a few days, they have not heard anything in weeks. Their daughter, Sarah Entwistle, said, "They were just trying to help the country they loved. The idea that they are being held because they were teaching mothers with children is outrageous." A spokesperson for the Afghan Taliban Interior Ministry said that the Reynolds were arrested due to a misunderstanding involving fake passports. A book detailing stories of women resisting the Russian invasion was recently published. However, its author, Ukrainian writer Victoria Amelina, was murdered by a Russian attack in July 2023. Entitled "Looking at Women Looking at War," the book began as a diary collecting Russian war crimes. Amelina included a quote from a Ukrainian human rights activist, which said, "If we lose, I want to at least tell the story of our pursuit of justice." Following her death, her colleagues ensured that her book, Her Testimony of the Russian Invasion and War Against Ukraine, was published. A Louisiana grand jury indicted a doctor in New York for allegedly prescribing abortion pills to a pregnant girl. An arrest warrant for the girl's mother was also issued. Louisiana is the first state to reclassify mifepristone and misoprostol as controlled dangerous substances. Chastity Wilson, executive director of the Louisiana Abortion Fund, said, "We cannot continue to allow forced birth extremists to interfere with our ability to access necessary health care. Extremists hope that this case will cause a chilling effect, further tying the hands of doctors who took an oath to take care of their patients." NASA was instructed to remove mention of diversity, inclusion, environmental justice, and women in leadership from agency websites by the Trump administration. The list also included Indigenous people and anything specifically targeting women. Several pages are still up, however. It should be noted that, on the Artemis 3 mission scheduled for 2027, NASA expects to land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon. Moreover, a Nature article published in June 2024 found that women may be more resilient to the effects of spaceflight. Due to the foreign aid funding freeze implemented by Donald Trump, aid agencies around the world declared that decades of work in female-focused healthcare have been decimated overnight. USAID, which was responsible for distributing aid to women's groups globally, has been completely gutted. In Uganda, hundreds of physicians who provided HIV care were told to go home. The Guttmacher Institute estimates that about 2.5 million women and girls have been denied contraceptive care. That number is expected to rise to 11.7 million by the end of the Trump administration's 90-day foreign aid review process. Gil Won-ok, a vocal critic of Japan's refusal to take responsibility for the sexual slavery it inflicted on Korean women during World War II, has died at the age of 96. While she is among the last of the survivors, in 2013 she said, They are wrong if they think it will be over when the last of us die. There will be our descendants continuing to campaign as long as it takes to get the apology we deserve. It will not be over with our death. The fight and her legacy continues. Women's Declaration International U.S. Chapter will be hosting public events on March 8th, International Women's Day, in solidarity with our sisters in Afghanistan. Events will take place in Washington, D.C. on 1st Street between the Supreme Court and the Capitol at noon, in LA at 120 South Doheny Drive, Beverly Hills at 10 a.m., and in New York City in front of the New York Public Library on 5th Avenue between 40th and 41st Streets at 2 p.m. At the events, volunteers will read statements from Afghan women, hold signs, and distribute materials to spread awareness about the struggles of living under the Taliban's patriarchal regime. An excerpt from one of the statements reads, "Afghanistan has become the graveyard of buried hopes. They have burned thousands of young people's hopes and dreams into ashes, especially those of women and girls, and I am one of them. We hope to see you there." That concludes WLRN's World News segment for Thursday, March 6th, 2025. I'm Mary. Share your news stories, announcements, and tips with us by emailing info@WLRNmedia.com and letting us know what's going on.
This is Joe Brew, and you are listening to WLRN.
Thought the fire with fire would burn the problem quicker, but all this good advice, his hair just grows back thicker. And if I take my own advice, the worst just gets here quicker. So what's it all supposed to do? This fire eats fire and the fire's in you, and I have nothing here for you. All this water's gone on you. You've done nothing here for me, except I know that I can't breathe, and we've taken all we can. I guess I'm mad because I am, and I've tried this all before. Just in my head I'm in control, which is why the music died, and we're living out our lives in this hope one day our lives will straighten out, and we'll leave town, and we'll get down to business now. Will someone tell me who I am? It's always been a little hard. I wish that you could meet her, this woman that you have become. You know that she's a keeper, except you keep her under wraps in case someone should break her. It's dirty in this world, it's true. I wish I could, and she does too. And I have nothing here for you. All this water's gone on you. You've done nothing here for me, except I know that I can't breathe, and we've taken all we can. I guess I'm mad because I am, and I've tried this all before. Just in my head I'm in control, which is why the music died. We're living out our lives in this hope one day our lives will straighten out, and we'll leave town, and we'll get down to business now. Will someone tell me who I am? I believe the good will out, and pain does have its purpose. It seems a little silly now that you would just desert us. I know that everything you do, things happen for a reason, but give me something good.
That was AlicebanD and her song Fire with Fire. Next up, we'll hear excerpts of an interview Thistle did with Ava Park, founder of the Temple of the Goddess of Orange County, a county bordering Los Angeles County in California. Thistle starts off the interview by asking Ava to introduce herself and her work with the Museum of Woman and the Temple of the Goddess. After Ava tells us a bit about herself and her work, she recounts some of what she and her community members experienced firsthand during the fires that broke out in their region a month and a half ago. She ends her interview with a call for women to write to the mayor of Los Angeles, urging her to reinstate lesbian Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, so that Crowley can use what she learned from this catastrophe to help prepare the fire department and Angelenos in the future. The email address of the Mayor of Los Angeles, along with a template letter you can work from, can be found in the description of podcast 107 on our website, WLRNmedia.com. But for now, take a listen to Miss Ava Park talking with Thistle about her work and her life during and after the LA fires.
We are primarily a women's group, and we have very regular events for women. Every 6 weeks, as the seasons turn, we have a gathering that focuses on both what we can celebrate about the season and what lessons we can learn from Mother Nature about that particular season. And this keeps us, why is this important? This keeps us women in closer contact with the reality of Mother Nature. And this is something that men with their transhumanism are really trying to either run away from or try to control. Mm-hmm. It's, women are the life givers. And my good friend Wolfgang, husband to Vajra Ma, my friend and colleague, he said something so profound many years ago. He said, when a man sees the incredible power, beauty, awesomeness of a woman, he has two choices. He can stand in absolute awe of her power, or he can try to control that power. And in ancient matriarchies, men stand in awe of woman's power. They know that women have greater powers in many ways than they do. And this is not to say that women are better than, just like, a mother has greater powers than her child, but that doesn't make her better than her child. But we should acknowledge the reality that women have great powers, that we are the ones who do the shamanic work of bringing something from spirit into physical reality. We birth the babies. So men can either be in awe of that and support that and nurture that and further that, or they can try to control it. And as you see every day in your work, most men are just trying to control it. And that's when everything goes to hell. So we have a lot of social events like our spring tea coming up March 8th. I'd like to say it's really important, as useful and helpful as Zoom has been. It is really important that women get together physically, not just always online. There's something that happens in a physical circle of women that cannot happen on a screen. It's a certain type of energy that we give each other. So we must not lose our physical circles. And women and, people in general, children even, are living more and more of their lives on screen. This will not be good for us. So in today's day and age, and, of course, here we are on Zoom, and we couldn't otherwise talk unless we used the screen and the computer. So I'm not saying it's not without its uses. Of course it is. But we women need to maintain physical contact with one another in small circles. This is how women function. This is how we learn, how we grow, how we gain that kind of good shared power. And we must maintain those in-person connections. We have to retain our humanity. So we also speak to groups on various women-related topics, and we do a lot of interviews such as this one. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and your group and the people who follow you. It's really, really an honor.
Yeah, well, it's always exciting to find other women who are organizing women and getting groups together in person and also online. I appreciate what you just said about women meeting in person. So your community meets in person about every 6 weeks. How was your community impacted by the fires? Did anyone in your community have to evacuate? Where were you when you discovered that the fires were happening. And can you just tell us a little bit of your personal story?
Yes. We have many members in Los Angeles, and I was awakened in the middle of the night by one of our members who was having to evacuate. And this was not really on the news yet, but it was starting to ramp up. And so people were, finding out about it a little bit later. But I found out about it a little bit earlier because of our member. She said, "Do you know what's happening up here?" And we're about 45 minutes south of where the most severe areas were impacted. But yes, one of our members lost everything. Her home burned to the ground, and she's safe, but she has lost literally everything. She just walked away with the clothes on her back. And we have many other friends who lost their homes too. So it's been really deeply shocking to us all. We had some fires here in Orange County. They were put out rather quickly because our resources were still operating. Firefighters were still able to get to them in time. But the winds were, I really could see how severe it was because of the winds. So some of the winds were clocked at over 100 miles an hour. And that, I'm not sure what it was at my house, but it pretty much destroyed my atrium, which is an outdoor area that's mostly protected. But somehow the wind dropped down in there and just absolutely ruined everything. So the winds were remarkable.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of climate change. I've read that the winds are going to pick up all over the place, all over the world. Why do you think these fires happened? What was it? What set the scene? What was the thing that sparked that first spark and made the fire travel? Why did they happen?
The experts will tell you that the fires were so much worse this year due to this sort of perfect storm, this combination of factors. First, SoCal Edison has to take some responsibility. They are admitting that their faulty power lines, some of their faulty power lines and some of their faulty electrical equipment were primary ignition sources. And they admit that their own equipment ignited 60% more fires in 2024 compared to the previous year. Now, of course, the second factor, the Santa Anas, the winds, 100-mile-an-hour winds were a huge factor. As I said, it was shockingly windy, even down here in Orange County. All my animals were like terrified and huddled up in the corner. Some of the embers, it was discovered, flew through the air nearly 20 miles to start other fires. And that's sort of unheard of because embers usually can travel about a mile through the air and start a fire. But 20 miles? Wow.
And this is because of the winds.
Yes, right. So they were carried on this 100-mile-an-hour wind, which, is nobody's specific fault. Then
right.
the third,
I'm sorry, but we can also expect in the future with increased climate change that the winds are going to continue to pick up.
No doubt. The third factor were the combination of drought and vegetation. So we had a combination. We've been in a drought for a long time. Then we had some rain, which created this fast-growing vegetation. Then that was followed by minimal rainfall and record high temperatures, and that dried out all the vegetation, which was then primed to burn. But, Thistle, for me, the real core issue is this. We are not building homes for people in a sensible way. Indigenous cultures paid attention to Mother Nature, to the weather, to the rainfall, to the topography, to the animals that lived around them, to the vegetation of an area. And they respected Mother Nature, and they attempted to build in harmony with her. But, our dominator model culture does none of that. We build where we damn well want to build, and to hell with what Mother Nature says. Well, guess what? She lets us know who is ultimately in charge. And that's what we saw.
And do you think that now that we see and we have evidence that this is a man-made problem, climate change is a contributing factor, has LA learned its lesson? Are things going to be different in the future now in the rebuilding?
I am sorry to say, it is my considered opinion, no, not yet. The major metropolitan area of Southern California is 24 million people, just in Southern California. So to continue to build in the way we have in this area is insanity. This is a Mediterranean climate, warm, dry summers with little to no rain, mild, somewhat wet winters with an annual rainfall of between 10 and 20 inches. This is dry. And these long dry periods of drought that we've been in due to climate change and other things tremendously increase the wildfires. So to continue to build homes so especially some of these inland and hilly areas is crazy. And to continue to build them of wood siding. Okay, most of the homes that burned, most of the homes that have been built in the last 50 years, they are of wood siding, wood roofs, attached wooden decks, and wooden fences. This is crazy. Wood frame construction is what most of the houses that burned were made of. And you know what? Wood frame construction is another word for fuel, fuel for fires. And these houses are built so close together so greedy developers can make more money. But these houses that are built so close together are just a fire trap, just a fire trap. In my opinion, we should really stop building in Southern California. We are too dense right now. And I know this is not popular at all. We really need to, when we rebuild these homes, and I'm sorry to say, I do not think this is going to happen yet. I think we're going to have to see even more destruction before people get it. But anybody who rebuilds, it should be built of, we know what the fire resistant materials are: concrete, metal or clay tile roofing, tempered glass windows, because when windows burst, the embers go in and start burning the house from the inside out. Steel or fiber cement siding instead of wood siding, enclosed eaves. Why are eaves important? Because a lot of the homes started on fire because the embers went into the eaves that were not enclosed and they started the fire. And the vents, there are things called fire resistant vents. So you have a lot of vents to your house. If they're not fire resistant vents, then the embers go into the vents and start the fire from the inside. And then finally, internal and external sprinkler systems. But all of this, all of this costs money and nobody wants to pay. So
yeah,
we're paying now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been hearing in the news about the insurance companies not really wanting to renew contracts, and feeling like they don't have the money to help with the rebuilding. Where is the help coming from in LA to rebuild? And are there any fireproofing standards that are being recommended or even required in the rebuilding?
Well, with regard to the insurance companies, I know everybody's blaming them and very angry with them. 16 companies have pulled out of Southern California and will just not insure. 16 major companies. So, insurance is a for-profit business. And obviously, you can have that argument about, how much for-profit should there be. And there's lots to talk about. We could spend a long time in insurance. But if insurance companies leave an area because they think it's too dangerous and they cannot function as a for-profit company with the conditions that exist, well, you can hardly blame them. If I ran an insurance company and I was going to go broke providing insurance to people with wood frame houses in a high fire area, well, you can say, well, they deserve to be insured. Well, do they? I'm not too much of a conspiracy theorist, but sometimes it's not a conspiracy, it's actually a thing. It seems interesting to me that a place like Lahaina in Hawaii, or Pacific Palisades and Malibu and Pasadena, Eaton Canyon in Southern California, some of the priciest real estate in the world. I wonder if there's something about a land grab here. Let it burn, swoop in, buy up the cheap real estate of desperate people who just need a little bit of money to get away, then make a fortune rebuilding in some more profitable way in the best weather on earth. And everybody wants to live, well, a lot of people around the world want to live in Southern California, even with all of our problems.
Who's going to make that land grab?
Developers, possibly.
Developers. Mm-hmm.
So some people think, now this is a conspiracy theory, and your viewers can decide for themselves. Some people think that this destruction actually paves the way for projects like smart cities or infrastructure for upcoming events such as the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. And I cannot say if this is true or not, but I tell you, I have a theory that there are awful, average, and aware men. And awful men are just evil. You can just, name your evil men. And they're about 10% of the population of men. And then there are aware men, and they are really trying to do good for humanity. You can decide who those men are for yourself. And they're 10%. And then 80% of men are what we would refer to as average men. And the terrible mistake that everyone makes, including women, is that we assume that average men are good men. And I am so sorry to tell you that it is a continuum, a spectrum. On the one hand, you have average men who watch porn every day. That is an average man. And then on the other side of the average man, the continuum is somebody who's really trying to become an aware man. And then there's everything in the middle. The man who would go to a prostituted woman, the man who would scream at his wife and terrorize her. Those are all average men. So I would not put it past average men, and certainly awful men, to do something like this, these developers, or at least take advantage of a terrible situation for their own profit. So if civilization is going to continue to be led by greedy men who want to make a quick buck and don't care what happens to people long term, then yeah, this is going to be a part of normal life in today's world. This is the normal result of a society led by average and awful men. And I'm going to take aware men to task here, that 10% of aware men. They are far too silent. What the hell is wrong with them? They need to teach their brothers better. And not very many of them are speaking up. There's a few, like Greg Braden, who is warning us about the dangers of transhumanism. I'm a big follower and fan of Greg Braden. But most men are either part of the problem or they are remaining largely silent. And if we do not change our way of thinking to be more like the Iroquois model, Haudenosaunee peoples of 7 generations, the 7 generations, I know you know about this, you've heard about this, but for your viewers who might not know, this is a philosophy of thinking with foresight about how the decisions of today's leaders are going to affect the next 7 generations. And if we don't start changing our model of thinking, we're going to continue to see the collapse of our culture in many ways. 7 generations is only about 200 years. And if we don't have that kind of long-term thinking because we are led almost solely by men. And because women have a mindset of caring for life because we are the creators of life, we are the ones who respect all life. We are the ones seeing ourselves more as one with all life. We women tend to think more about the long-term consequences of our choices, far more than the average man does. We women see ourselves as the caretakers of the family and the community and of Earth, and not, as many men do, as the owners of Earth. And what can WLRN listeners do to help the effort? Well, here's the thing. The LA mayor just fired LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, saying she did a bad job responding to the fires. And Thistle, I don't know that anybody could have handled these incredible fires any better. Crowley made history as the first female and first openly gay fire chief of the LA Fire Department. And she did embrace DEI publicly, which some on the right said affected the department's abilities overall. Who knows? I'm not to be the judge of that. I'm not an insider on that. But I will say her deputy chief, a butch lesbian, Christine Larson, said something incredibly stupid on camera. She was asked about female firefighters' ability to perform, and she responded on camera that a person needing rescue from a fire got himself, and I saw this video multiple times, got himself in the wrong place. This video went viral during the wildfires with a huge backlash and really made the fire department look stupid. So everyone has to smarten up about what they say on camera because people will use it against women. And Fire Chief Crowley has defended herself, saying budget cuts affected her ability to run things. And I think the mayor is just looking for a scapegoat, someone to blame for this tremendously horrific disaster. And now everybody's pointing fingers. Personally, I think Crowley should be reinstated. I think she should be given the budget she says she needs to run things properly as fire chief. And then I think we need to see how she does with the next fire season. If it's obvious that she's not competent, well, fire her then. I think it's just too easy to blame the lesbian and punish her for a situation probably nobody could have done much better with the circumstances. So those of your members who agree with my position, you can send an email to the mayor's office at mayor.helpdesk@lacity.org. mayor.helpdesk@lacity.org.
Great, and we'll put that in the write-up. And what should they say in that email?
Give Crowley back her position, give her the money she needs to run her department properly, and give her a year or two through another fire season or two to prove herself, and then make the decision. That's what I think would be the most useful thing at this point. I think she's being turned into some kind of scapegoat. Get rid of the butch lesbian. So I think she should be given a chance to prove herself in another fire season.
Okay, well, that's great. We can definitely put that email address into our write-up and encourage our listeners to write to the mayor of Los Angeles to reinstate Crowley. Thank you so much, Ava, for sharing your stories from the LA area surrounding these fires. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we say goodbye?
So we women are the rightful leaders of civilization. So let us remind our own families, our own communities, our local, our national governments. Let us remind them that we are the rightful good leaders. Women make good leaders. There's more justice, there's more fairness, there's more prosperity when women lead. Women must lead the next generation of humanity. It is the only way we can save ourselves in the next 7 generations. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you our thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ava.
That was Sinead O'Connor with her song Fire on Babylon. Now we turn to another interview Thistle did with Angelino Goldie Hoffman. Goldie is an actress and comedian who was safely up in the mountains when the fires broke out, but upon returning to her home in LA discovered her neighborhood was covered in a gray, toxic ash. Goldie talks with Thistle about her experiences of the fires themselves and also what they mean for her life and the lives of Angelinos in general. This excerpt begins with Goldie telling listeners a bit about herself, her line of work, and her personal history in LA. Take a listen.
So I am a comedian and an actor in LA. I'm not originally from LA. I grew up first partially in New York and then Montreal, Canada. And then I moved to Vancouver. I'm giving you like a really fast version. And then I came to LA. So I started doing comedy and film in Vancouver, which is one of Hollywood's like satellite cities. You know, Atlanta's another one. They shoot a lot in Vancouver, Canada. Then I decided to come here. So I'm an American and Canadian. I'm dual. And
oh, cool. So you have dual citizenship.
Yeah. My mother's Canadian. My father is American from California. Although now he's no longer here, of course. He's around, he's in the planet, but he's in Vegas. So when I moved here, I didn't have family living here. But yeah, I always kind of knew that I was going to come back, even though we left right before I started high school. I not that I didn't feel Canadian. That took a long time, but it sort of is a merged identity. You know, I often say, and you'll hear this sometimes from dual citizens, when I go to Canada, I feel very American. And then when I'm in the US, feel more Canadian, but that stopped after several years. I feel, just American, very Californian, actually. So.
How long have you lived in LA this last time that you've moved there and you've been...
Yeah, that's hard to say because at first I was coming back and forth and hadn't really moved, but I've been living here for at least 6 years. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have been doing stand-up comedy and acting gigs while living in LA, right?
Yeah, a lot of comedy. And of course, when you say acting gig, I did some theater, even though, LA is not really thought of as theater or independent theaters. And I've also done a little, some film projects and series, but when you say, well, the life of an actor usually is, they're a professional auditioner. So that's really the bulk of it. Although recently I kind of have not been doing much of either, in large part due to my feminist activism. So,
oh, interesting. Well, we need to make turfing cool, And anyway, we'll get onto that some other time. But let's bring it back to the subject of this podcast, which is the recent LA fires.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you when you learned that they were happening? And were you in the midst of them? Did you have to evacuate? Did you have friends that had to evacuate? What was your personal experience of the LA fires?
Well, I'll start by saying I feel bad. I don't have the dramatic story that perhaps you or the listeners are wanting. I was fortunate. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I was fortunate. But I was actually out of LA at the time, and at my partner's cabin in the mountains, which ironically became the safer place. Usually in the mountains are a big risk for fires. So this time it was the city. I mean, you usually, in fact, whenever there's a warning of wildfires in the mountains, people who have access to a city place or family, they'll often like, oh, I'm going to go away for the next few days just in case. In fact, some people had done that due to the wind warnings. Nobody expects LA to burn. That's what I remember. Even family saying, I'm like, LA will never burn. Every time there was a wildfire in the surrounding mountains or area close to LA, like, no, it's ridiculous. I'm in Hollywood. Nothing is going to happen. It's an urban city. It's all concrete. There's fire departments.
Well, it turns out a lot of those houses are not concrete. They're made out of wood.
But you think of yourself in the city as an urban jungle, and that you have fire hydrants and you have a fire department. And this is the big problem, is that, this was so shocking.
Right. And then it was also like the water wasn't correctly,
the mismanagement. I mean, and I'll have a lot to say about that. This was basically just to say, although it was unprecedented, it was, it was completely preventable. Like most, that's what they specify. People specify between natural disasters and natural hazards. And a disaster is technically something you could have prevented, which we did not. And this is unfortunately one of them. And that's a larger issue. I don't know if you want to get into it now, but I mean, it's always an issue with humans. We never want to spend on prevention. It's an unsexy sell in politics. You can't show that the money prevented something. I can't show you.
I mean, I guess you could maybe if there was a much smaller fire and the fire hydrants had worked.
Right. But in terms of, let's say you redo something and you make it more fire resistant. I can't prove to you that, see, you haven't had a fire since, or like in policing work or prevention, see, we haven't had, a break. You can't prove, well, maybe no one tried.
The absence of the crime or the occurrence doesn't prove that.
Right, but you need money
to prevented, I guess, is what you're saying.
Infrastructure, it's the same problem you have all around the U.S. is you have crumbling infrastructure, like let's say overpasses, underpasses, railroads, all of that. Try to sell. You're not going to win an election if you're like, we need billions to fix up this stuff. The problem is most people, until they see the crumbled thing, they're not willing to put it. They want the shiny new building.
So just cutting to the chase about the fires, how do you think this may have changed the people in LA in terms of thinking about the future and maybe doing some prevention and investing in prevention? Is that conversation happening amongst politicians, amongst neighbors?
It is happening among, I think, in politicians. They're forced to, but sadly, you asked, I mean, when we were discussing this about, is it business as usual? Unfortunately, for a lot of people, yes. It's like, this is the problem. Like, oh, it was an anomaly. And so what is the likelihood of it happening again? Instead of, which is probably the thinking, who's to say? I mean, one of the fire chiefs said, I mean, we could have another one. So yes, this is unprecedented now, but what if this becomes more, I don't want to even say it, more of the norm?
Well, I mean, is it really a what if? It is more of the norm. Like, it's not right here in Wisconsin right now, it's way above the average temperature. It's above the temperature it's supposed to be. And it's just going to keep getting hotter and hotter. I mean,
yeah. And the wildfire season, I mean, if you do research on wildfires, and, you know, those of us who care have gone down and are reading about this and listening, I mean, it's bad. As all along the West Coast, it turns out that in the world, most wildfires happen around like California area. I didn't even know that, but now it's spreading. It went all the way up to Canada. And not only that, when people go, oh, but it's a normal part, some part of wildfires is part of just natural clearing. Yes, but not to this extent. And not
I don't think that people realize how close we are to the entire freaking planet just burning up.
There's constantly
fires all across the freaking world at the same time.
It's bad to say that. I mean, you're talking to a happy depressive or a happy pessimist, because I'm reading, you know, an asteroid is heading for us, and NASA's trying to figure out how to deflect it if possible. And I'm going, why? Let it hit. Put us out of our misery. Let it do what it needs to do. So
I agree. And so, but let's bring it back to your personal experience, okay? Because you were in the mountains,
right?
So but then you had to go back. You went home. Did you drive past? Did you?
No, we did not go back. We didn't come back.
Oh,
the air. Just a lot. We would have had to be traveling through Pasadena and Altadena, which is where the Eaton fire was raging. So it was not possible, really, and nor would we want to. In fact, if you had access to anywhere else in the surrounding area or, somewhere else, people went. If you knew friends or family, that was the best place to be. Although there was a risk of it spreading into the mountains where the forests are. That's where the fires usually are. But until that, so we were, told to pack just in case. And we're always told we're supposed to have an evacuation thing ready. Most of us, I'm sad to admit, as much as I'm talking, like, have I done it? No, terrible. This is the one, I'm a procrastinator, but that is something you should not be procrastinating on, because you will not have time. But I did have friends. I have a friend, they lost I know several people who've lost their entire home. One of them, she runs a comedy studio. She has to live in the comedy studio, so at least she's there, but her place where she was renting is gone. I have another friend, the same thing. People did not have rental insurance or any type of, and even if they did, it only covers a certain amount. So a lot of people have resorted to, GoFundMe, and this is the crisis of our country. Everyone, from medical issues to, it shows to me a failure of the state, because that's not a sustainable policy. You can't say, when people are raising GoFundMes for cancer, you have a problem. You don't have a healthcare system. It's the same.
And I suppose the fires are just exacerbating and bringing to light this problem because it was a problem before the fires too.
Well, now it's exacerbated because homelessness, we know this, that was already a huge issue of California, because the nation's homeless go to the
warm now it's an even bigger issue.
Right. And, speaking.
I want to go back to your story. So you didn't drive back from the mountains right away. How long did it take before? I assume you're in your regular apartment.
In LA now. Yeah.
Okay. So how long before you were able to go back to your place of residence?
You were allowed to go earlier than a lot of people would recommend. This is the issue. When you look up that a lot of people are upset about, the air quality was really, and is for a long time, very dangerous, very toxic. And even air quality indexes, I was reading one article about this, doesn't even tell you the full picture. It would sometimes say good, but that only measures air quality index, AQI, only measures what's in the atmosphere. It did not measure, and there's nobody measuring this, the toxic effects and chemicals of burned man-made, human-made materials. So fridges.
Did you breathe some of it in, do you think?
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of health effects, but they've said, actually, some health professionals, we're going to be seeing the effects of this for decades. It was that bad. People are not, protected. The air quality.
Do you feel a difference in your throat and your lungs? Did you feel anything in your throat and your lungs, your nose?
Well, a lot of people did. I was back here within, I would say, a couple weeks. I did not, but it doesn't mean I'm not. It isn't there. Everything was covered in ash. And this is a neighborhood that was not technically in the fire zone or evacuation zone.
Your neighborhood was covered in ash.
The trees, everything was like a soot. And we only find out later there was no public guidelines also about handling things. And apparently even just touching the ash is quite toxic. So we don't know.
Did you touch it?
We did, but when we're rinsing it off, I'm sure it's everywhere. I mean, I don't know. We honestly don't know the full extent of, and there'll be no way to.
Doesn't the government have scientists coming in there and taking samples of the dust and
there's researchers. No, there are researchers. There's actually a study going on from 4 universities. They are
universities. Okay.
They are going to be looking at it, but it's not a government. It's just a research project from them. And
but hopefully
there isn't going to be any recourse. You can't prove, I got this, COPD or lung cancer in 10 years from this. But it could have been. You'll never know. The bigger effect, and talking for this show, is women, and let's say they're pregnant. Could be birth defects. We already know that inhaling just smoke, and now add with this toxic, the burning chemicals of the homes and stuff in it. There's asbestos, cyanide.
Lead. I heard lead.
Yep. And older buildings too, when they didn't, when I say asbestos today, you're not allowed that. But it's in a lot of the homes, and apparently, a lot of our cars burning, all of that. So that's in the air and in the ash. And we know already that just smoke from a regular fire causes low birth weight. It's been linked to low birth weight, and then low birth rate.
I am so sorry, Goldie.
I mean, I'm not pregnant, but I mean, think about all the women and it causes greater stress, then they have breathing issues. So it's a trickle effect. And as usual, and I'm sure your other guest has talked about this, but as usual, women and lower income people, of which women are always comprise a larger majority of, are hit harder. So I'm just going to turn on a light. It's getting.
Yeah, she did. Ava did touch on that. And, I mean, it's a proven fact. The feminist majority did some research on the LA fires. And yes, women and children and low income people are disproportionately impacted by these fires,
Yeah. So. Especially, and, you have so many women in domestic labor and a lot of those are undocumented or poor. And they have been extreme. Not only are they out of a job, this is the thing that's not being discussed, that there's services for people. Let's say there's relief funds if you were affected by the fire, but you might be affected because now the home that you used to clean is gone, and now you're out of a job. And if you are undocumented, you're not a citizen, you're not eligible for a lot of things. So it's just, the domino effect.
So what's happening in the street? Are people helping people? Are neighbors helping neighbors? Are there food pantries that are opening up and, where people are donating food and
especially in the I hate saying the early days. I mean, we're only barely a month out, but sadly, that's what it feels. It feels like you get a big push of community and help in the beginning of a disaster. And then very quickly people go, okay, I'm over it. And we saw this with the pandemic. I'm over it. Let's get back to normal, especially if they haven't been affected. I don't want to keep hearing about it. You'll hear stuff like that. So when people have come together, I don't want to just be the negative, just giving, bad news, but people did come together. There is services, even for instance, government programs, relief funds, charities, and I can mention some of those. But the problem is that even navigating that, is and everyone knows this. I mean, just going through that and where do I apply? What do I do? It's a nightmare in itself on top of everything that you're dealing with. California is notoriously already very regulated. So jumping through those hoops, like I'll just give you an example. There was a very publicized, and then there's people taking advantage. So that ties into this. So Airbnb teamed up with, California 211, which is a nonprofit that's supposed to help with services in general. You look up on their website, okay, I'm looking for housing. I'm looking for, relief of unemployment. And they're supposed to direct you to the right thing. So they teamed up with Airbnb.org, which is Airbnb's nonprofit organization, from what I found. And they made a big PR splash, right? Which has helped their stock, that they were giving Airbnb vouchers and credits. And they're going to waive the service fees. And many people did get these vouchers. They did serve several thousand people. I don't want to say they didn't, but many people felt completely shafted by when they would apply. You couldn't use it retroactively. They added all these restrictions. So, for example, if you go on Reddit or other articles about this, you had people who immediately in the fire, they're like, I'm going to rent an Airbnb. And then they heard about this program or already heard about it and they applied. But as you're waiting, it's not instant, several days, then it came through and you can't use it. They're like, but many people said, that's why I even booked Airbnb, especially when I heard about the program.
This sounds horrible.
So many people felt was on top of that. The people who couldn't use it felt like, wow. And they kept saying, and they still do, we just have no way to apply it retroactively. Who knows? The point is the company gained a lot of positive PR. And how many of the people did they help? I don't know. And not only that, sadly, and this is in the negative camp, people did help. People are staying in friends' places and family. And there was a lot, especially in the beginning, as I said, but there were also, and it has to be said, Angelenos, skyrocketing, jacking up prices, price gouging for remaining places or for their Airbnbs. Like, for instance, the place that I'm in, my LA place, we sometimes part-time Airbnb it. And we found out we had fire refugees staying here. That was a big reason we stayed. And there's also FEMA resources. They were using what they got, but they told us, and others did too, that other places were raising the rates at a time when people need it.
Wait a second.
The opposite.
When you came back to your place, you had fire refugees living in your place, squatting?
By it.
That were what? Sorry?
We were approached to give our, if we wanted to rent it out.
Oh, okay. Got you.
And because we're already on the Airbnb site, but we only use it part-time. And so I guess there was a contacting, and so we're like, sure, actually. So why, if we're going to stay out, we're able to stay there 2 hours out of LA where it's safer for the time being. If they want to, if people who have no home would like to be here, why have an empty sitting place that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So then there were fire refugees living in your home while you stayed in the mountains.
And we were paid, but we were paid what they got or whatever the certain amount. But we found out that sadly, many people who were also doing this raised their prices.
Right.
And there was price gouge, and that's disgusting.
That's the horrible side of
society.
What we see being cultivated in our common humanity, because I don't think it's in our nature. This is more of a philosophical discussion that I might steer us towards, but I don't believe people are inherently bad. I really don't. I think we all, maybe some of us are ignorant about what we're missing, in how wonderful life could be if we would engage in cooperation and, camaraderie and intentionally helping one another out. which is, we're hardwired to do that. We're a tribal species. Why is it that humans are able to do this othering? It's patriarchy. That's what it is. I'll tell you, that's what it is.
You know what it is? A lot of people are, sadly, and I've seen this in, leftist progressive circles, a lot of times we may announce or believe that we have certain values, but then when you're put to the test and it requires action, and sadly, we're even talking about people that would probably self-identify and call themselves progressives that had participated in price gouging, because in their head, there's then when they're faced with, but this is an opportunity to make some money, that kicks in. That capitalist part of society kicks in, and that's when you are tested. Is actually when you should be facing
right, because there's a lot of virtue signaling that goes on in our freaking society,
and we're not
too.
It's ourselves. No, that's the wrong. It's okay you had that thought, but it's the wrong. If your moral compass is screwed on straight, you will say immediately, if you did even have that thought, no, that would be wrong, because it's clearly unethical. Is it legal? Sure, but is it the best of ethics? No, and it goes, contrary to any progressive values you may, purport to have. So, you see a lot of that, but hypocrisy is nothing new. But again, I do want to say a lot of people came together. People, even just on the GoFundMe's, have funded it. I have a friend who's been raising one, and her thing.
And we can continue to encourage people to come together. It's not over yet.
No, unfortunately.
And so I think reward the good behavior, not ignore the bad behavior, but maybe even speak out a little bit against
shame it.
But let's encourage and let's fuel the community building. I wish that for you. I wish that for all Angelinos, for LA. I would like to see the City of Angels rise from the ashes and be able to have that healing. So I will keep that vision in my sphere. And I wanted to ask you, how has your life changed? Is there a before the fires life that you had, and now and after the fires? Do you know
for me
on the daily?
No, not for me personally, but yes, for a lot of people. And some people have that's the end of LA for them. That, especially if they were already thinking of leaving. LA at the end of the day, for a lot of people, is quite a transient city. We're always getting people, we're always leaving people, but some people have been here for generations, and that's it for them. If they've lost generation, Altadena had, for instance, one of the large, African-American community, who's, generational homes that they owned, especially from back in the day when they were still redlining. And unfortunately, some of those computers are completely gone. And it's not, how will you get back? As we know, it's way harder to own a home today. And so and that's even with insurance or to rebuild. There's also going to be a lot more pressure to gentrify these new areas. And that's where, as they rebuild, well, maybe
hopefully with steel and concrete instead of wood, I don't know. I just feel for not just the Angelinos and the situation of the people there, but for all of us here living on the earth and going through climate and social change that's quite chaotic and disorienting, confusing, and painful. Thank you so much, Goldie, for talking with me today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. And I wish I could be more optimistic, but I'm trying. So there you go.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
You are listening to WLRN.
I want to reframe environmentalism in the context of feminism and change the way we think about it as women. We have to see climate change and its resulting natural disasters as safety issues. Nature falling apart isn't just a sad disappointment for campers and hikers, it's a literal threat to our physical safety and survival. Fires, hurricanes, landslides, and extreme temperatures hurt and kill people. The LA fires killed 29 individuals who would otherwise still be here if not for the ecological conditions enabling the fires to spread as far and burn as long as they did. Isolated natural disasters like that represent one manifestation of life-threatening climate change. The other one we all have to face regardless of where in the country or the world we live in is extreme temperatures, both heat and cold, that will eventually become intolerable. When we talk about the Earth becoming uninhabitable as a result of climate change, that's not a metaphor or an exaggeration. We can and will end up at a point where we can no longer survive in the places we're used to living. Heat kills people. Cold kills people. Excessive rain that floods areas unprepared to handle it kills people. And simply moving away to a more naturally hospitable location won't be an option anymore when lethal temperatures become the global norm. Those conditions will occur everywhere. There won't be any place to run to. The Earth itself will no longer be safe for us. Women and girls are used to thinking of our own safety constantly, thanks to the fact so many males are sexual predators and physically violent. Maybe that's why women have always led the charge to save the Earth, while the rich and powerful men who run society abuse the planet and take its support for granted. Women create life. We understand that our lives depend on the Earth, that we are part of nature and not separate from it or above it. Women, being cooperative and communal, have always had the instinct to live in harmony with nature, interdependently. Men, being hierarchical and driven by the will to dominate, have seen nature the way they see women, as something to control, use, exploit, conquer, and ultimately destroy. In their arrogance, they believe the delusion that they can treat the Earth this way in perpetuity without suffering themselves. Women know that we aren't safe in a dying ecosystem. Ecofeminists and other environmentalist women have never just wanted to save the Earth. They wanted to save themselves and the rest of humankind. After our physical safety and survival, the ongoing ecocide we're witnessing is a threat to our homes. The LA fires drew so much attention because of how many homes they destroyed, unlike most wildfires that remain confined to animal habitats. So many people are comfortable with the persistent destruction of our planetary home, the Earth itself, but burn down their houses and they feel personally affected and victimized. They should, and it makes sense they do. But if we wait until our houses and apartment buildings are at risk of natural destruction before we care about what's happening in the environment, we're too late. The typical media bites provided by brave-faced survivors of the LA fires about rebuilding misses the point too. The primary issue is the entire natural world changing around us for the worse because of all the damage done to the atmosphere and the land over the last several decades. Rebuilding a house in what is now a fire zone or a hurricane zone or a flooding zone is only going to subject the homeowner to yet another home loss in the future when the next natural disaster unfolds. And there is no guarantee that any homeowner will survive a second or third or fourth disaster that destroys her home. Homelessness leaves women and girls incredibly vulnerable to violent and predatory men, even if that homelessness is temporary, short-term. Women and girls who are financially well off enough or connected enough that they have somewhere secure to live in the months after a natural disaster wrecks their housing should be all right in this sense. But so many women and girls in the US and around the world will never have the luxury of that security. They have nowhere to go if a fire burns their housing to the ground or if a hurricane blows it away. They have no money and nowhere to go, and predatory men will take advantage of their homelessness and desperation to rape them, traffic them, abuse them. Like I said, for women, the increase of natural disasters due to climate change is a safety issue. It isn't just our physical well-being and survival we need to think about when we consider the ecological future. Our mental health is at risk too, which is easy for people to dismiss until they're the ones experiencing the emotional and psychological consequences of losing a house or access to nature. Spending time outside, especially in the wilderness, is good for the human brain and nervous system. Every study we have on the subject unequivocally concludes this. So many women have experienced healing through exposure to nature, healing from the trauma they've survived because they grew up girls and live as women in patriarchy. The more we lose the natural world, the more separated we become from the wilderness, the worse off we'll be mentally and emotionally. Our ability to make the right decisions in our lives, to regulate our emotions, to handle hard times without walking away damaged, will diminish as nature becomes too dangerous, too toxic, or too scarce for us to spend any substantial time enjoying it. Again, we are made vulnerable as women to male violence and misogyny, and to the long-lasting effects thereof, because of our disconnection from the earth. Speaking of women's mental health, the LA fires reminded me of how important female community and friendship is for us all. How much we'll need to lean on each other as the earth continues to degrade and these life-changing disasters happen more frequently. There was a woman in California I saw in a news clip during the fire coverage who wasn't just grieving her own home, but the neighborhood she'd lived in for years, which will never be the same even if it is rebuilt. She has stayed with me, I think, because she wasn't just upset over her possessions and the cost of replacing them, including her house itself. She was upset at the idea of losing connection with her longtime neighbors, and upset for them, too, knowing exactly how they felt about losing their own homes. As expensive and traumatic and challenging as it is to have your house burned down, houses can ultimately be rebuilt and all the stuff inside repurchased. But community and the tenuous connections we might have with longtime neighbors we've never actually befriended but who we appreciate, those are not easily replaceable. People are not interchangeable, and the destruction of a community's physical place almost always means the community itself disappears, even if some of its members come back. We may not be able to stop the death of the planet, and we already know we're not going to end patriarchy. We're facing a dark future as people and as women, and we don't stand a chance of mentally and emotionally persevering through it without each other's support. We need other women in our corner when it's our turn to survive a natural disaster. We need other women to back us up when we fight for the natural world and when we fight for our safety as women. We need the emotional support, the psychological strength, the physical presence of other women who care about the beauty and comfort and sanctity of the earth and our collective need for it. Without that, living is just too hard.
Thanks for listening to WLRN's 107th edition podcast on the LA fires. WLRN would like to thank our guests this month for sharing their stories and views. Thank you so much to Ava Park and Goldie Hoffman for speaking with us. Women's Liberation Front is holding Wolf Rad Femme Summer Camp June 24th to 29th in the Pacific Northwest. Rad Femme Summer Camp invites you to attend for some or all of those dates to learn about and engage in discussion on radical feminist theory, political strategy, and organizing methods. There will also be lots of time for skill shares, breakout sessions, gentle hikes, time around the campfire, and discussions with other women. Visit womensliberationfront.org, go to the Get Involved tab, and find Rad Femme Summer Camp. We hope to see you in June. Until next time, This is Frida signing off on another WLRN podcast.
This is Mary, signing off on another edition of WLRN's monthly handcrafted podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Spinster, Over It, and SoundCloud, in addition to our WordPress site. Thanks for listening.
And this is Aurora. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Next month, we will focus our program on the recent re-release of Andrea Dworkin's book, Right Wing Women. Our handcrafted podcasts always come out on the first Thursday of the month, so look out for it on Thursday, April 3rd. If you'd like to receive our newsletter that notifies you when each podcast, music show, and new interviews are released, please sign up for our newsletter on the WLRN WordPress site. Stay strong in the struggle, and thank you for listening.
And this is Ann Castile. Our monthly podcasts are always crafted with tender, loving care and in solidarity with women worldwide. Thanks for your support. We would love to hear from you, so please share, like, and comment widely.
But how will we find our way out of this? What is the antidote for the patriarchal kiss? How will we find what needs to be shown? And then after that, where is home? Tell me, where is my home? 'Cause gender